Evening all, how are we doing? It's Monday afternoon and we are fresh back from Colney ahead of tomorrow night's game against Wolves at Carrow Road. David Freezer here alongside Paddy Davitt, and I've been having a chat with Daniel Farke and Marco Stiepermann ahead of that game tomorrow night. Let's get stuck into the team news then, Pad. Nelson Oliveira was your first question, and we can rule him out for tomorrow night, can't we?
Yeah, not a huge surprise, mate, to be honest. Calf injury, not quite, as in we won't be seeing him again for a few weeks. As we stand, he's had a scan. There's no bleed on it, which, if you draw a parallel with Tete, I think there was bleeding on his calf there, hence why he's out minimum 4 weeks, possibly longer. So Farke wasn't completely ruling him out for Bolton this Saturday, certainly for tomorrow night, not for Bolton. But I think the reality is, after Bolton, there's a 2-week international break, and it feels like a bit of deja vu, because going into the last international break, that was the period when they were going to get to the bottom of whatever it is that's troubling him, and they clearly haven't. So it's even more imperative now that whether he's available or not at Bolton, that when we hit the other side, which is Barnsley, I think, at Carrow Road, that Nelson Oliveira is fit and able to start games, because it's turning into a bit of a saga. Okay, it isn't the groin or groin-related problems on Saturday, but to me it's all interlinked, isn't it? It's like when you're coming back, you hear about it, don't you, all the time, when players come back from a long-term injury and say a knee problem or whatever, and then something else breaks down because the body's almost trying to compensate, and as Farke again reiterated today, it's not healthy for the player himself, mentally as well as physically. It's not good for Farke in terms of the limited options and the stress it's being put on Jerome, for example. And it's not good for the rest of the squad, is it really? Because they all know, as much as we do, as much as the fans do, that you get a fit Nelson Oliveira on the pitch, he will score goals in the Championship. So it's really frustrating, because if you did have that option at the minute, I don't think we'd be sat here now, as we're probably going to get on to, talking about 5 games at Carrow Road, 3 goals scored. I think a fit Oliveira in this period, Norwich probably would have edged some of those draws into wins,
I think you could almost sense a little bit of exasperation in Daniel today, couldn't you? In that he is clearly wanting that international break from the point of view that he wants to get players back fit. He mentioned that Josh Murphy needs that break just to get fully fit. Ivo Pinto, it should be okay for tomorrow, shouldn't he? But it will help him. Stephen Naismith, another one who's back in training, but after the international break should be in a better position. So he's almost longing for it, but he's got another 2 games before he gets to that point, isn't he? Yeah,
and tomorrow night, obviously a very tough game in store against a very, very good side, who can, in sharp contrast to Norwich, I mean, they can probably name 2 sides, with the depth of their resource at the minute. I know they got beat at QPR on Saturday, but that's probably the Championship for you in a nutshell.
Daniel talked about that, the amount of experience that they've got in depth, didn't he?
He did, and also the sheer quality. I mean, the parallel for me that he drew was Wolves of a 20-year-old midfielder who they paid £15.8 million to Porto for in the summer. Ruben Neves, who by all accounts is a very integral part of what they're trying to do, and Norwich of a 20-year-old midfielder in James Maddison, who certainly didn't cost £15.8 million, and his pedigree was a few Championship cameos from the bench last season. So therein lies the gulf, maybe, in terms of resource, but that isn't Farke trying to be defeatist. I think he's just trying to be very, very realistic that tomorrow is going to be a very tall order, I think, and all the more so because, as you rightly say, these injury problems refuse to go away. Although, having said that, there was a silver lining with Mr. Pritchard.
Yeah, that was a nice little line. Before we come on to that, just because we mentioned Ivo Pinto there, we've got a first comment here from Thomas Baker. Is Pinto the weak link? He gives the ball away a lot. Get your comments and questions in. We'll be around for the next sort of 15, 20 minutes. We'll get as many of them answered as we can. Would you say that's a tad harsh? I mean, I've never been Ivo's biggest fan, certainly defensively, but he does give you a lot in terms of dynamism going forward, although arguably his final ball isn't always great either, is it?
No, that's probably a fair comment, but I thought he was the catalyst in the first half, at least on Saturday, just with those numerous bursts and willingness to commit players to go past them. And maybe what the question's sort of alluding to is the end product there, because on each occasion I don't think that I think that he forced a few corners, but there was no dangerous balls going into the box, and Yeah, I can see why he might frustrate one or two, but I personally always have him in terms of what Norwich have got available.
Yeah.
And I think he's been quite key in a leadership role as well on this run. You know, he's taken the armband from Russell Martin. I like how he's just very understatedly goes about it. How he's clearly a very popular player within the group, within the dynamic. You can see that he's got the respect of his fellow teammates, and he's
taken the leadership role on, and really you can see him.
I think it's added to him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's added to his game, and I think he's relishing it. He's one of those who clearly feels that maybe he's been surprised that Daniel's placed that trust in him, but he's certainly risen to the challenge. And yeah, okay, but I mean, you could probably go through every Norwich player and sort of pick out one or two aspects of their game that would frustrate you, but overall I think if you're looking through Norwich's entire squad, when all fit and available, Ivo Pinto starts every day of the week for me.
That's not gone down too well, I'm afraid, Thomas. Kelly Hutchinson thinks it's very harsh. Barry back, Ivo has no one ahead of him, impossible task. Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of a defensive shield, he doesn't get too much. Simon Meadows, think if Nelson Oliveira remains injured, unable to sustain playing games, we shortly need to look at getting a proven goal scorer in January to back up Cameron Jerome and Marley Watkins. Obviously they've got to wait till January for that, but you asked Daniel a bit about Marley today, didn't you? And he
well, taking that point to its logical conclusion, if we're basically saying Oliveira for the foreseeable future isn't a reliable option, and the load that's been placed on Jerome is excessive at the minute, but that's has been needs must, then surely Watkins is got to come into the equation, and as Farker said, you know, he basically got himself sent off at Reading. That was a 3-game ban. He went away with Wales. He picked up an ankle problem. He's effectively played very little football in the last 5 or 6 weeks, and in Farker's view, he's still not really back up to speed. It's almost like he's had a midwinter break kind of thing of his own making, really.
So he benefits from it long term then.
Well, this is what Farker's hoping, that you know, he is a viable option, and as I said to him, Marley Watkins, Brentford away in the League Cup, he was excellent that night, playing in a central role. You know, he was able to go beyond and stretch the play. He was able to come short and link the play. He is quite an athletic type. Physically, there's no problem holding the ball up and battling defenders. So, and he's got a goal threat in him if you look at his show reel from Barnsley. So,
and a goal against Brighton in pre-season.
Exactly, which was an unbelievable finish. Yeah, so clearly you would have to think he has to come into the equation now seriously, because you know, that'll open another can of worms, really, that Jerome, we know what he gives you, and one thing he doesn't probably is, certainly in this season's efforts, is a reliable goal threat. Maybe because he's being asked to do so much outside the box, and you know, I just think he's not getting any younger. Is he 31 now? And I think he needs to come out of the firing line personally. But as I say, who comes in, then it's only really, if you take Oliveira out of the equation at the minute, it's Watkins or Josh Murphy, and that underlines the point.
Well, really, I mean, he has played through the middle for Wigan, isn't he? And he's somebody who's, well, there's a comment here actually. Richie Temple, Wildscott on top form. Hope he starts. I mean, I think he deserves a start tomorrow, certainly on the right. But I think he could do you a job through the middle, because he just sort of gets his head down and charges through, doesn't he? So, I mean, there are options there. But you look at Cam's performance on Saturday, and it was unselfish. Yeah. But the effort that he curled wide, and the one that he put just over the bar, they weren't bad efforts, but they weren't particularly threatening, were they? And his confidence just seems to be low. And Daniel actually admitted today, didn't he, that he'd like to dip him out if he could.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you can understand why, because the nature of how Norwich have gone about, you look at all these wins they've had on the road, it's basically been counter-attacking, soaking up pressure and playing on the break. You know, Sheffield United, he did an immense amount of work that day, selfless work, you know, to offer himself as a target to relieve pressure, so the centre-backs or the full-backs could just hit him, and then they get players up the park because he'd hold on to the ball, he'd hold off defenders, and that is a very gruelling way of playing the game, you know. And again, it was the same at Reading, the same sort of template. Middlesbrough, again, and he's been excellent in all those games, really. You know, he's been an integral part of those wins. But I think I wrote about it today, you know, of the two, him or Oliveira, Norwich always look far more potent when Oliveira's leading the line, because he might do that type of side of the game, but what he will also do, because you can see the hunger in the man, that when the ball goes anywhere near the penalty box, he comes alive, and he's always there, he's always on the turn. You know, you saw the goal against Hull. Lest we forget, that was Jerome who made that to a degree. You know, Stiepermann's long throw, Jerome near post, nuisance value, and it's Oliveira running off the back of him. So really, if you break it down, and we're talking about Norwich failing to score goals or not scoring enough goals at Carrow Road, then clearly that is what you expect your striker to be able to chip in with, and he's not really doing that. And if he's not really doing that, then is it worth maybe giving somebody else a go?
Absolutely. Colin Anderson, how far off are Fonkeu or Abrahams? I mean, I don't think they're in the first team thinking, are they? Yeah,
no.
They're, as you just listed there, you've got Josh Murphy, Yannick Wildskut, Stephen Naismith when he's fit, Marley Watkins, Jerome and Oliveira. I think they're the 6 options, if you want to look at it in that way, who are ahead of those guys. They both come into the system this summer, and I'd imagine they're looking at a season to work with them. If you look at Carlton Morris, he's had to go out on loan a few times now to get anywhere even close to it, isn't he?
He has, and it's almost like you get the sense we've seen Webber's verdict on the academy, and then we've seen changes in the academy in terms of the structure and the coaching setup. Latterly Darren Huckabee's departure. It almost feels like they're resetting the button there with the academy, and it's almost from a standing start. They've brought in the likes of those 2 players, but they've literally just come in the building in the last couple of months, and to come in, play a few games at development level, and then expect to be then challenging a club with aspirations of being at the top end of the Championship. That's a tall order. I mean, Abrahams was at Orient last season, wasn't he? At the bottom of League 2. So,
and only just making his senior debut at the start of this year, I think. So.
Exactly. So, we can probably get into a deeper debate about areas of the squad and where they're light and where they're thin. But I suppose if you were to speak to Stuart Webber or Daniel Farker about it at the start of the season, they thought they were probably well stocked at the top end of the pitch, because you had Jerome and you had Oliveira, and by common consent, those 2 on their day were as good as anything in the Championship. But then again, it's probably naive to expect you're going to go through a season at this level, as gruelling as it is, and not have either injuries or suspensions kicking in. And unfortunately, in Oliveira's case, it's becoming a far more prolonged period of where he's not available 90 minutes week in, week out.
As you said, it's become a bit of a saga. Tom Hill says Murphy at striker, ? I'm not sure if that's a suggestion or whether he doesn't like this suggestion. You have to let us know, Tom. But he goes on to say even Stiepermann maybe. Now, we asked Marco about this today. He was the player at Presser, and he was a good guy to chat to, actually. We asked him a little bit about his history, because he did play striker as a young guy, and he said that he likes to score goals. He has played up front, but that Daniel saw him as being a left-back option, and he agreed it suits his abilities, didn't he?
He did. He said he sees plenty of the ball in that position, because in the modern game, the full-backs, the wing-back areas are so important, because that's usually where the space is in a lot of these games nowadays, and because of that, he's very, and he's also got that freedom as well to get forward, and we saw that to good effect, on 2 occasions. Unfortunately, again, he touched on it today. His finishing wasn't what it needed to be. But
so
the fact,
close.
The first one certainly, but the fact he's getting in the box as well, he must feel that it's not a left back in the sense of don't cross the halfway line and just hold your station and be very sort of disciplined and basically take care of the opposition's wide player. He, in the way Norwich are trying to do it, he's getting plenty of freedom to break forward, and I like him. I think he looks a good signing, because physically he's got the presence as well, which you're going to need in the Championship. And he it's not that he's come in and he's a big lad, but he's not willing to put himself about. He's more than happy to do that side of the game. So that, to me personally, I don't know his backstory. I wouldn't have been able to talk to you about Marco Stiepermann, the midfielder, or the number 10, or the striker prior to this season, but certainly in a left wing back role, he looks very comfortable there.
Yeah, we had a nice chat with him, actually. I mean, you don't play for Dortmund unless you've got something about you, do you? Even at a junior level. So, and perhaps that can be said for Christoph Zimmermann as well, of course. But something I'd asked him about, noticed on Instagram that he'd recently had a kid, and he said Leonard, a little boy. So he's now feeling very settled, thanks to his little lad, and his wife are here in Norfolk with him now. So that's helped him kick on. Let's bring Alex Pritchard back into things. Richie Temple's comment here: Maddison and Houlihan starting. Are they too similar and a luxury? Now, a bit of good news on Alex Pritchard today, wasn't there, in that he's going to be back in training second week of the international break. So that sort of schedule seems to keep edging forward a little bit, although Daniel keeps offering a little bit of caution, doesn't he? But once you've got him added into that mix, then that really is a difficult balance to strike, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we're back to too many number 10s and not enough number 9s maybe, but I'd rather have Alex Pritchard fit and available and have that thorny problem of a Maddison who's really kicked on and really developed, and a Wes who maybe his influence is on the wane slightly because he's obviously not getting any younger, and you can see now that maybe Maddison is of the two slightly a step ahead of him now, certainly on this season's efforts. But you know, I think Maddison is showing signs of a little bit of fatigue because he has been asked to do so much, and that's understandable. You know, as we said right at the start, 20 years of age, and this is his first proper season at this level, and he's been targeted. We've seen it. You know, he's come in for some stiff treatment of late because he has been so good and so eye-catching. Yeah, the sooner Alex Pritchard's available and can come back into that mix, the better. And you know, I think you'd find as well that we probably wouldn't be talking to such a degree at the minute about Norwich at Carrow Road and not being able to open teams up because, as he showed, you know, in that extended 10-game run under Alan Irvine, he was excellent. He's such an intelligent player and such a clever player. And yeah, I think once he's back in the mix, then that particular dilemma is a nice one to have. You know, who do you perm out of Maddison, Wes and Alex Pritchard?
I mean, Houlihan and Pritchard linked up quite nicely, didn't they? You look back on the 7-1 against Reading, and obviously with Oliveira in the mix as well, that was such a potent attacking force. And Alex did play on the right for Brentford, so I think you can probably just about make it work. But as you say, Maddison's probably going to need to be dipped out at some point. But yeah, Alex back in training, second week of international break, so hopefully might be back near the first team contention by December, which should obviously be great news. The other sort of main issue we discussed today was Grant Hanley, not named in the Scotland squad, so no Norwich player in the Scotland squad under which we think Malky Mackay has chosen, so that's the first time in quite a while there hasn't been a Norwich player in their squad. And you spoke to Daniel about whether it's now time for him to come in. David Platten says here, would you bring Hanley in on Tuesday, give Christoph Zimmerman a break? Yeah, it's been a hectic 4 months for Christoph Zimmerman ever since he's come in. He played so much in pre-season and he's played a really big role. I wondered whether Daniel was almost thinking about a 3 at the back tomorrow night.
Yeah, I got that sense as well. In which case, you don't need to drop any of them out, do you? I think Wolves play a 3, so whether he wants to try and match up in that regard, then time will tell. But the interesting part of that discussion was when he basically said Hanley would start tomorrow if Zimmerman hadn't been at fault, should we say, for the first goal, the first Derby goal. In the sense that if you were to take him out now, that might hit his confidence because he knows he's made a mistake. He was at fault for the first goal, albeit an excellent finish from David Nugent. So he was more of a mind to maybe say, okay, go again. Okay, that was an error, but you've been excellent alongside Tim Closer. I've got full faith still in you. Go out and show me, why that is the case, because it's a lot. In Farke's words, it's a lot easier to make these changes when defensively, for example, when the team have kept a clean sheet or the game's been won, rather than that's an error, that's a mistake, I'm going to punish you, I'm going to take you out. So it sounded like, he basically said he's still, at this point, this was earlier today, he still said he had a day and a half to decide. So it sounds like he is wrestling with that dilemma, whether it is now, time for Hanley to come in. If you're Grant Hanley, you've swapped one bench for another, effectively. You left Newcastle to get regular football, you've come here. You've had to bide your time, quite rightly, because those two lads were integral to that upturn in terms of defensive behaviour from Norwich. But me personally, I think the last few games there's been signs that there's been 1 or 2 cracks there central defensively. Certainly defending set pieces, Closer, the second goal at Arsenal, Zimmerman on Saturday, and if you've got a guy like Hanley in reserve and you've paid the money for him and you thought you needed that sort of British steel, then I think it's time he should get a game and let's see what he's all about. And for me, that's no reflection on Zimmerman or Closer. It's just, it feels like it needs freshening up now from 1 to 11. And there's certain areas of the pitch, i.e. top end of the pitch, where he hasn't got the options. But you wouldn't say that at centre back now. So for me, if Hanley was starting tomorrow night, I wouldn't be averse to that. No.
It'd be interesting to see how he gets on as well. And Daniel said that his attitude has been spot on, didn't he? He said that he's not sort of kicked up any fuss, that he's realised that Zimmerman and Closer have been playing well enough to keep him out of the team. A few comments from Craig Brown here along those lines. Time for Hanley to start and to drop Zimmerman. Zimmerman poor against Hull and Derby, got to be dropped. What's the point in having Hanley if you don't pick him? Perhaps a little bit harsh, and something I think we were talking about earlier was that you could see the sort of Alex Tetty-shaped hole in the midfield. If you think about the Hull goal at Carrow Road and that Nugent goal for Derby on Saturday, the pass was from Richard Keogh, centre back, wasn't it? Stepped up and just managed to get his way straight through midfield. So that's being felt as well, and that's another name that Daniel had mentioned. This international break will benefit him, didn't he?
Tete?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of that's another 2 weeks further down the line in his recovery. Well, you only have to go back to Millwall. A lot is made of that as a watershed moment, and what did Millwall basically usher in? It was the return of Alex Tete alongside Tom Tribal, and what a partnership they were forming. Really complement each other's styles. You saw Tribal again on Saturday. In possession, his range of passing, his just intelligence to sort of almost anticipate where the ball's going to drop in that central area, and then you throw that into the mix with Tete's ability to break up play, to screen the back four, and I think that's a fair point. Certainly when it went 1-1, Norwich had so many creative players on the pitch that Maddison was effectively deployed in that holding role, because by that stage he'd thrown on Wiltshire, Marley Watkins was on the park, Oliveira was on and then had come off, Wes was still on the park, wasn't he, and Jerome, and just to have Tete in that role while still obviously trying to go on and win the game. You can't underestimate the balance that he brings to the side, and you saw how they are vulnerable when he wasn't in the team up to Millwall, and then after Millwall how far more solid they looked, and as much as we've touched on Pritchard and what a big boost that will be, getting Tete back for me is as big a boost, I think.
Absolutely. Harrison Reed, I thought he had a reasonable game on Saturday. I did the player watch on him for PinkUn.com, and I thought he played fairly well, but he doesn't hold that central role in the same way that Tete does he? He tends to be moving around, and him and Tribal, there's some lovely sort of triangle passes and keeping control of the ball without necessarily too much sort of incision, but he's not the same player as Tete, is he?
No. And, he'd be the first to say that, but I suppose there's ways of trying to control that midfield, and if it's in terms of passing the ball, good rotation, moving it on swiftly, or you're basically nice and solid, and when the opposition have it, then you've got somebody who can go in, break the play up and get you back on the front foot. I just think, as good a player as Reed could potentially be moving forward, I think Tete has got that experience. He knows what the Championship is all about now. He's been in it long enough, and him and Tribal for me were a far better combination than Tribal and Reed, and that's why beyond these next two games, if they go into Barnsley and Tete's in and around it and Pritchard's back in training and hopefully Oliveira's fitness is far more positive and the bulletin is looking a lot healthier, then I think they're set fair then to go in and really attack that phase from then up to Christmas, which is obviously going to be quite pivotal. I think at the minute it just feels like tomorrow night and Bolton is just get through, is just almost try by hook or by crook to come out of these two games unbeaten, and as I say, then have a breather for 2 weeks and then really attack it up to Christmas.
If you can get 4 points out of these two games, I think most people would take that, wouldn't
they?
Tony Eccleston, definitely time to rotate the squad a bit, and Craig Brown lastly. I saw Close in Chapelfield earlier today. Top man, love that guy. He is so friendly, and he certainly is. Tim Closer, always a good guy to speak to for the media, and he was talking to Michael about his boat again after the game on Saturday, wasn't he? So I'm sort of weirdly feeling a bit positive about tomorrow night. Just a lifetime of Norwich City experience tells me that a home game at Carrow Road, when the pressure isn't on them, that the team that's arriving are the favourites, as Daniel said they were today. I just got a feeling that things might click together tomorrow, and Wolves obviously been through the same sort of schedule as Norwich. They were taken to penalties by Manchester City last week, so they had a bad result on Saturday as well, losing 2-1 at QPR. Are you sort of feeling any positivity about it, or are you a bit nervous about it with them being such a high-flying team?
Well, ultimately, if it's the Wolves who seem to be cutting a sway through the division prior to last week, then you would be a little bit fearful, because it looked like they were emerging as that. It never fails, is it? There's always seemingly one team who really put their stamp on the division as it elapses, and Newcastle the year under Houghton, Brighton maybe to a lesser extent. There's always one standout for me, and they looked like they were shaping up to be that. But as you say, there's a bit of a parallel with Norwich in the last 7 days, and what I think is, and I said it to Farker earlier, is Wolves aren't going to come here and do a Hull, do a Derby to a degree, do a Burton certainly, or even a Bristol City, and basically try and frustrate Norwich and try and hit them on the counter. They will come here, they will look to show why they're being touted as promotion favourites. Good technical players across the middle of the park, pace out wide as well. So I think they will come and try and play Norwich rather than try and frustrate, and that might work to Norwich's favour, because then you're almost getting into the dynamic of what Norwich have faced away from home, where they haven't had maybe as much possession as the opposition, yet they've been able to be very solid without the ball and then have enough creativity to hit on the counter and then see out the game. So in terms of the type of game we might get at Carrow Road tomorrow night, I think that might suit Norwich better than what we've seen in this sort of five game run. Three goals scored at home, really failing, albeit creating one or two good chances, but failing to really cut through, break down teams and go on and win games at home. So that's probably where I'm sort of deriving a degree of optimism from, is that I think because Wolves will try and be progressive, that could suit Norwich.
Okay, well, no love lost between Norwich and Wolves fans, is there? So if they could get a result tomorrow night, that would really get things back on track, wouldn't it? Right, thanks, Pad. We will wrap up now. Loads to get your teeth into at PinkUn.com already. Videos with Daniel Farker and Marco Stiepermann. Pad's now going to go and get the paper put to bed for tomorrow, so make sure you pick up your copy in the morning as well, and we'll catch up with you when the team news drops at Carrow Road tomorrow and see how City go on. Cheers.